Time for good old-fashioned Trump reviews. Trump's review. Gadgetzan version. I'm going to aim to do the Trump's reviews of Trump reviews about 3 months into the expansion from here on out. The original review is intended to talk about specifically how good these cards are in that 4-month period of time between expansions. So when I reviewed this review, even though some of the cards have gotten drastically better post-Gadgetzan, I'm talking about the standard meta, which was only Gadgetzan. So there was primarily Dragon Warrior, but also a decent amount of Cthulhu Warrior and some one-turn kill Warrior. But basically it was Warrior Stone as the dominant deck. There was some aggro Shaman, some midrange Hunter, some Zoo Warlock, some Tempo Mage, some Token Druid. The meta after Gadgetzan ended up being Shaman Stone and mostly midrange Shaman. With a very light amount of other decks, Secret Hunter, Control Warrior, Yogg Druid, Tempo Mage as the primary decks. This video also had 3 categories to it: bad, potential, and good. I've since then expanded into a 5-star system. And to kind of relate it, bad is about 1 star, potential is about 3 stars, good is about 5 star, or really bad is like 1 star, 2 star, and good is 4 star, 5 star. I'll elaborate on what I believe I was intending to rate it from a star system here, and then rate what I know it was given the meta now. We're gonna start with a pretty exciting one right here. I can say for certain that Enchanted Raven is a good card. It will be in all the Beast Druid decks, I think, and I also think that Beast Druid will be a thing. Based off of my enthusiasm for Beast Druid deck, I'm going to say that old me gave Enchanted Raven a 5-star. Enchanted Raven and Beast decks in general ended up being fringe decks. Enchanted Raven saw play in the fringe deck, but was never really competitive. So, Enchanted Raven, 2-star. Menagerie Warden. This card is insane. The Beast Druid deck is going to be built so that you survive until you can cast Menagerie Warden, at which point you are going to get so much value. Even in Arena, this card presents the opportunity for such value that I think it'll be a great Arena card. So that was clearly a 5-star rating, and I think this was the card that I might have thought was one of the strongest cards in the set. Ended up being not really that powerful because the Beast Druid deck didn't see that much play. Of course, Menagerie Warden and Enchanted Raven saw play in every single Beast Druid deck. It's just that the Beast Druid deck happened to be not nearly as good as I and a lot of people had thought. So Menagerie Warden actually ends up getting a post-reflection 2-star rating. Blade Portal. I think this fits right into the Yogg Druid deck if it has a home, because you're going to get roughly a 5/5 and you get 6 health. That was good enough for Warrior, could be good enough for Druid. Yeah, I'd say I rated that one 3 stars. It wasn't seen in every single Yogg Druid deck. It was kind of a flex card. Some people played it, some people didn't play it. The Hunters are getting an interesting set of cards. Yogg Load is currently not a top competitive deck, although it is actually kind of up there. This might be the card to push it over the top. It's a good card! I would have rated this a 4-star given my lack of total enthusiasm for this deck, for this card. And I also called it like good in Yogg Load. Turned out it wasn't that great in Yogg Load, mostly because your King's Elk wouldn't be very good with the Cloaked Huntress, and Yogg Load never ended up being a serious competitive deck. But what it was good for, and why this card is now rated 5 stars by me, is that it created a Secret Hunter deck, which was actually a legitimately strong deck. If the meta had continued for a while, Secret Hunter might have been discovered to be a decent another meta pick to combine with midrange Shaman. Oh, this card's adorable. This card's got some potential, especially given the Huntress was printed. Alright, so I rated that a 3-star. Probably didn't realize that this card was going to be seeing play in every single Cloaked Huntress deck. It's also one of the best secrets, as it turns out. Still 5 stars because this card saw play in 100% of a major deck, Secret Hunter. Kindly Grandmother. So maybe Kindly Grandmother does get run as a sticky beast. It's basically only good because of Handmaster, currently. And that's the reason why this card will probably replace Huge Toad in the Hunter deck. I rated this a 4-star. It's actually a 5-star. This card was seen in all of the Hunter decks, mid-range and secret. Just having something sticky that you can handmaster is good enough. Babbling Book. There is a potential for a control mage or a value mage or a Reno mage or any of those, which Babbling Book does fit because those decks actually need an early drop. It's just a 1/1, but in mage you have the Fire Blast, so that suddenly means Babbling Book can trade into a 3/2. I think this card is deceptively good. Not quite good enough for me to call it good yet. I'm not sure if it fits into Tempo Mage more, if it fits into a Control Mage. Maybe a Reno Mage pops up, and if it's a Reno Mage, I think Babbling Book actually makes the cut. In Arena, this card's gonna be good. Now remember, this is Karazhan meta. Reno Mage exists now, but past me had no idea that Kazakus would be a card. I rated this 3 stars. Its true rating isn't actually a 5-star just because it won Pavel BlizzCon 2016 though. It did see play in Tempo Mage, but did not see play in all of Tempo Mage. So I'm going to say this card is most accurately a 4-star given my rating system. It just turns out that a 1-mana 1/1 which draws a card, even though sometimes the card isn't that good, is good. One of the reasons why Babbling Book, why I may have upgraded it a little bit, is because Medivh's Valet is insane. This one encourages a secret build, encourages like a control build, encourages perhaps Reno. This card is great, and it just depends on whether or not a control mage is viable. And in Arena, this card is obviously good since it's 2-mana 2/3 with a big bonus. I'm going to say, based off of my raving of that card, that I gave it a 5-star. So this card didn't end up being quite as good as I had thought. That said, I did enjoy a lot of success with it, and it did see play in a very specific Burn Mage deck. Given that that deck didn't really see that much competitive play though, I'm going to say that this card is actually 2 stars. And while we're talking about a Control Mage or Reno Mage, if Reno Mage is out there, you will run Firelands Portal. If Control Mage is out there, I think Firelands Portal is run sometimes. So it's like on the good potential, I'm going to call it good. And in Arena, this card is insane, and lol, this being common. So Tempo Mage actually ran this card. It was that good. But even though it was a 7-drop, some Tempo Mages didn't run it, some Tempo Mages did. I think ultimately most people ran 1. So it's a 4-star card. Nightbane Templar certainly pushes a different deck. I think this card is good enough, combined with Dragon Consort, to push the Dragon Paladin theme. So Nightbane Templar, good card. Alright, so I rated that a 4-star. Turns out, just like a Dragon Consort, which I thought might push the Dragon Paladin deck to be good, I thought this might be the card to push it through. Turns out it didn't, and Dragon Paladin never made it as a deck. Nightbane Templar is actually a 1-star card. Womp womp. Silver Moon Portal, Keeper of Olamon is also 4 mana, and you're getting a 3/4 with that. Summon a random 2-cost minion is giving you something more close to like a 2/2 or a 3/2. Here's our first bad card, and that's kind of a surprise that every single card I've reviewed so far is either good or has potential. Well, I clearly was too enthusiastic about the other cards, right? So I rated this a 1-star, and it was a 1-star. Didn't see play in any major competitive decks. I was experimented with and ended up being surprisingly better than it looks. But, you know, that's not saying much. It was still bad. Ivory Knight. Control Paladin hasn't really shown itself to be a great deck yet, and I don't think this card is fast enough in Dragon Paladin. Even if this card doesn't see play yet, in the future, if Control Paladin gets more cards, you might see Ivory Knight around. Alright, so I rated that a 3-star, or possibly closer to a 2-star. This is a 3-star card. It was seen in Anything Can Happen decks, which was not a particularly strong competitive deck, but saw some competitive play. I still maintain that it will see play if Control Paladin ends up being a good deck ever. I'm afraid that Priest is not going to get much love, starting with Purify. As is, this card doesn't have enough application, and it's a bad card. And in Arena, it's really bad since you can't combo it. What Purify was good for is creating lots of memes and getting Blizzard to notice Priest. So that's why Blizzard gave Priest one of the most OP cards in the set, Draconid OP. But anyways, Purify I rated a 1-star, and it's a 1-star card. Priest of the Feast. This is a good Control Priest card, but the Control Priest matchups against all decks right now is so abysmal that Priest of the Feast is not going to be good enough to bring it back. For the purposes of this expansion, which is to say Karazhan standard play, Priest of the Feast will not see any play. So therefore I rate the card bad, even though it's a good card. I was really specific in this read, and probably my most accurate read in this review. It's like, I'm not even sure the differentiation here. It's a good card, but in a really bad class. I think it's probably most accurate that I rated it a 1 star, and it is a 1 star card. Onyx Bishop! I anticipate that should the next expansion bring cards which have drawbacks but are great when brought back from the dead, then Onyx Bishop and Resurrect will probably see play in that deck. However, at this moment, I do not see enough synergy with Onyx Bishop or Resurrect. This is not going to be enough, and I rate it bad, and it will not see play competitively because Control Priest is not strong enough. So, in Arena, this card's good. So I rated it a 1 star. I'd say it's more accurate to rate this a 2-star card, though, because it did see play in a fringe deck which had some popularity at some point. Specifically, it turns out that if you combo it specifically with Injured Blademaster in a Resurrect deck, you get enough resurrection effects that the Injured Blademaster is actually okay. Rogue gets some cool themes with this set. Opens the way for a control rogue or a value rogue. I'm going to say this card has potential. I personally don't believe that a value rogue deck is going to be good enough yet, but I think that one is going to be close. That's my suspicion. I could just say this card is bad. I don't think it'll see enough play. I don't think Ethereal Peddler is good enough. I don't think that's... Rogue as a class has enough tools to play a value game, but I'm going to say potential instead. In Arena, this card's pretty good since it's a 1-mana, 1-1, and draw a random card is better because you have fewer good cards than in Constructed. If I rated it in post-gadgetzan meta, it would actually be a 5-star card. In Karazhan Standard, this card saw a little bit of play, like a very small amount, in Miracle Rogue, which was not that good a deck. I rated this card a 2-star, and I am going to say that I think it is a 2-star card for the purposes of Karazhan Standard. Deadly Fork, a bit too slow currently. Rogue might not have enough comeback cards. Might see some play in a Reno Rogue at the moment, if Reno Rogue will be a thing. Yep, turned out to be way too slow in Constructed. So I rated it a 1-star, and it is a 1-star card. Ethereal Peddler. I think the Theft deck doesn't have enough tools yet. That said, I'm still going to call this card potential, even though I probably should call it bad. In Arena, this card's going to be great. It's 5-mana, 5/6. That wording of I'm going to call it potential, even though I should probably call it bad, is kind of a reason why I moved to 1-star to 5-star rating. So that's exactly the type of rating I would give to a 2-star card. So I rated it a 2-star. And it ended up being a 1-star card because it saw absolutely no play whatsoever in any competitive deck. Spirit Claws. That's a 1-mana 3/3 weapon. Wow! This has a great potential to be a huge breakout card of the set. This could be the card that helps Control Shaman become a serious contender. I'd like to say I rated this a 5-star. The way that I talked about it, it was closer to like a 4.5. I talked about Control Shaman, but you have to remember the meta pre-Karazhan. It was mostly Dragon Warrior, and most of the shamans out there were face shamans. So when I talked about a Control Shaman deck, I really meant a deck with like Lightning Storm and maybe Fire Elemental, maybe Thunder Bluff Valiant. When you think about it, mid-range Shaman is absolutely a control deck, and I'm not even sure why it's called mid-range Shaman. So this card helped define a meta. Clearly, it deserved its 5-star rating. Maelstrom Portal is the the Arcane Explosion, and gives you a small, like, 1-cost minion as a bonus. 1-cost minion really being, like, a random 2/1 usually, or 1/2. I feel like with Lightning Storm, this card will not see play. And with Elemental Destruction, too. It's just, you can't run that many small damage AoE cards. But yeah, I rated this a 1-star card because Arcane Explosion was terrible. It's like, summon a random uncost minion. How much better can that card be? It turns out that it's a combination of both focusing more on spell damage, which makes it a 2 damage to all enemy minions, and summoning 1 cost minion actually being a big deal. That make this card a 5-star card and help define the mid-range meta. Wicked Witch Doctor, while the teacher isn't seeing play, I can quickly say that Wicked Witch Doctor probably won't see play. Sure, there are a lot of cards that reward you for having a lot of totems out, but I feel like Wicked Witch Doctor is not strong enough of a force in order to utilize those cards. So I rated that a 1-star card. Actually, 2-star card. There were mid-range shaman decks which tried running Wicked Witch Doctor with Primal Fusion. It was not that much worse, if it was worse than mid-range shaman. It was probably like really slightly worse. Warlock's a class that actually gets a very cool set of cards, starting with Malchezaar's Imp. It rewards discarding. I think that it will create 2 versions of Zoo. There's going to be like your usual Zoo deck, but it'll spawn its offshoot deck, which is a discard themed deck. I think that has a real chance of giving normal Zoo a run for its money, even though it has much greater variance. This card actually helped shape Zoo to a new type of Zoo. Disco Zoo ended up being the better Zoo, though it took some time to find the right amount of discard cards to put into your Zoo. So I rated the card 4 stars, and I think that's a good place to put it right now, 4 stars. Zoo was a deck that ended up being somewhere between decent and good at the top competitive levels. It just turned out that mid-range Shaman was so dominating that Zoo ended up being not so great a matchup against it, and therefore this card, which might have normally been a 5-star if Zoo was the top deck, ends up getting relegated to 4 stars instead. The card that makes Malchezaar's Imp that good is the Silverware Golem. You have to draw both the discard enablers and the discard mechanics, and the discarding has to hit the discard enablers. Tough to say whether or not that's going to work in practice, but you can certainly imagine how if it does hit the Silverware Golem and the Fist of Jaraxxus, your cards will get tremendous value and be extremely tempo heavy. A lot of RNG. I feel like competitive players might not be too keen on this one, but objectively I feel like it's a good card which enables another theme. And the deck was there. Silverware Golem along with Malchezaar's Imp helped Zoo move into a different direction. It didn't make Zoo that much more powerful, but it moved in a different direction. It was like a slight side grade / very small upgrade. People weren't sure how to build the discard deck. They weren't sure how many discard elements to put into it. Ended up being that you put in Doomguard, you put in Soulfire, and then Darkshire Librarian was the final discard mechanism that was just good enough. So I rated that a 4-star, and it did end up being a 4-star. Karakazam. If Reno Lock makes a comeback, I feel like Karakazam makes it into that deck along with Cho'Gall. So therefore I will rate Karakazam as potential. Alright, so I'll say I rated that a 3-star. I thought it would very specifically make it into the Reno Lock deck, and Cho'Gall would be put in with it. I was wrong. Reno Lock not only ended up not being a very good deck, Karakazam did not see anywhere near making it in, and neither did Cho'Gall. So this was actually a 1-star card. Finally, for class cards, we've got Warrior. I'm here to tell you that your Protect the King Bolster Dream isn't going to work, and this card is just too situational, too specific, too not strong enough that even in the great situation that it would be good. I rated that a 1-star card. It's probably the card that I had the most fun trying to build competitive decks for. With Bolster, obviously it was the intention. One of the decks actually ended up doing pretty well, but I'm not even going to qualify that as anywhere near a competitive deck. I would not bring it anywhere near a competitive event, and card sucks. Though it was kind of fun to experiment with. Ironforge Portal probably cost just a little too much to be played. Bad card. So I rated that a 1-star card. Actually ends up being a 4-star card. In Control Warrior, which was a decent deck, probably about the same, slightly better than Zoo actually. Turns out that it was closer to the Shield Maiden than I had thought. Most Control Warriors ran Ironforge Portal, especially ones with Yuck. And we've got Fool's Bane. So is this card good enough to make it into Control Warrior? I feel like this is worth trying out. And I'm going to say that this has potential. Maybe I'll just use my freebie wild prediction. Like, I'll put a big question mark. I have no idea how this card will do. We'll play it and we'll see how it works in practice. So I rated that a 3-star if we use today's system. Question mark was a pretty accurate rating. It saw a little bit of play in some Control Warrior decks. Just ends up costing a little too much to be able to clear off the stuff that you want to clear with Fool's Bane. Runic Egg. I rate that this card has potential and looks a lot worse than it is. In Arena, that card sucks. I wish I knew if I meant potential as in 2-star or 3-star. I'm going to say that I rated this card a 2-star, because I don't remember actually seriously considering this card. This card did see play in the 1-turn kill Raging Worgen deck. Perhaps it is accurate to say that it is a 2-star card. Unfortunately, the Raging Worgen combo deck ended up getting nerfed off by Blizzard later on during Karazhan Standard. Wouldn't be surprised if Runic Egg managed to fit into another combo-ish deck someday. Turns out drawing a card for cheap is pretty good. Arcane Anomaly. I think it just requires too many fiddling with it to make it any good. I rated that a 1-star card, and while it could be easy to say, and yes, it was a 1-star card, I'm actually going to say this ended up being a 2-star card. Why? Because it did see some fringe play in a fringe deck that saw some fringe competitive play. You put it in the very aggressive Divine Strength deck for Paladin, where you just put all the very cheap minions, you tried to buff them early, you Divine Favored to get a bunch more stuff. And this card ended up making the cut for that deck. I'll call it a 2-star card. It is like just barely hanging on to that rating though. Pompous Thespian. I think a 2-mana 3/2 taunt actually is in the upper power level of a 3/2, but because it is not in the top level, it will probably not see play. Yeah, 2-mana 3/2 taunt, not good enough. I rated a 1-star, it's a 1-star card. Then the Spidestwarian is a really important card, which is going to enable a lot of control dragon decks. This is the best priest card in the set. Against control decks, you will pretty much get to discover those huge dragons. Against decks that are beating your face in, you can draw the 3/6 taunt, Twilight Guardian. So I actually rated it a 5-star card, given that I thought that Dragon Paladin would be a thing, given that I think that Dragon Priest was possibly a thing, and given that I thought that Control Warrior Dragon could be a thing. It being able to fit through all of those. More accurately though, during the Karazhan Standard format, it's like just barely a 2-star card, because Dragon Paladin never ended up being a thing, Dragon Priest ended up not being a thing as well, and Dragon Control Warrior ended up not being a thing. It still was just Dragon Warrior, which was a aggressive deck, a mid-range deck, I should say. If I were to rate this in gadgetzan Standard, the way that it's currently going, so it'd be closer to like a 4-star card. Violet Illusionist is a really cool design. So basically, Violet Illusionist is a really cool card, but I think ultimately, even though it's like a huge Swiss Army knife, I don't think it's strong enough to fit into any decks. But regardless, just because it can do so many cool things, I'm going to put it in the potential category. Deep inside, I feel like it will not see any play, but it has so many possibilities, it'll be tried out. I rated that a 2-star card just because it had so many possible things that it could have gone into that surely one of them would pan out. So this ended up being a 1-star card, but it was pretty interesting. And I do enjoy cards like this. Pantry Spider. Ultimately, it's more interesting than it seems, but probably isn't strong enough. I rated that a 1-star card. I didn't actually talk about that it might see play in Evolve as well, because Evolve wasn't really a thing. This card saw some play in Evolve decks. Evolve decks ended up sucking as well. but it ended up being more legitimate to talk about Evolve than like Beast Energy and whatnot. Even though it's 3 mana for 2/6 in stats, it's like statted in almost the worst way you could for a 2/6. Interesting card, but bad. Moros. Basically, there's a lot of answers to Moros out there, but in specific situations, you can certainly negotiate the Moros. You don't have to get that much value out of Moros. That's probably the important thing to think about. In Arena, this card is actually going to be insane. I think. A lot of people were playing Dragon Warrior, so everyone would get Ravaging Gold, so Moros was thought of as trash. Turns out that I underestimated Maelstrom Portal, so that was another very common way to kill Moros. I admitted it was slow, and it ended up being too slow. But I actually think that it was mostly Shaman that ended up keeping this card down because of Maelstrom Portal and Lightning Storm, making Moros so often not getting any value at all. Maybe Moros makes a triumphant comeback someday, in the right meta. So anyways, I rated it a 3-star card, ended up being a 1-star card. Alright, Barnes. This card's one of the best cards in the set, I think. Even if you get your Loot Hoarder, that's pretty good. You can have the potential for some serious combo action, where you only put in Malagos and Emperor Thorsan in the deck, and the Barnes is always getting one of those. Needless to say, there's a lot of potential for this card to pull out something really good. This was a strong card. Not the strongest card in the set. Strongest card in the set probably goes to Spirit Claws. So Barnes ended up seeing play in a good amount of the strongest deck out there for the meta, which was mid-range Shaman. You put in your Barnes, ended up being good to draw your Blood Mage Thalnos, as well as a host of other cards. You put it in decks with only Barnes and Yasharaj in it, and then you played Barnes, and then you got Yasharaj, and then Yasharaj summoned Yasharaj. And that was a not too competitive deck, but it was pretty fun. Saw some play in Malagos Rogue, where you would hope to get it out with gadgetzan Auctioneer. Saw some play in Druid, where you hope to get a big thing out. I'm not going to say all over the place, but it was scattered periodically across top decks. So I rated it a 5-star, and it was a 5-star card. Arcana Smith. You know, I said don't underestimate Arcana Smith, and I think that even as I said that, I underestimated Arcana Smith. That said, though, I still think the card is bad. Yeah, I rated it a 1-star, and it was a 1-star, didn't see any play. But I did, like, muse a lot about, is this the next heal bot? And it's not actually that far away from it. Not getting the help immediately does suck, obviously. Prince Malchezaar. I made a comment along the lines of how I think this is one of the worst cards in the set. Adding extra legendary minions to your deck is going to be bad. On average. There are some really bad legendaries out there. But then, and this is one of those moments where I was in the shower, I was just soaking, and I was like thinking, have I forgotten anything about any of these cards? And then I thought of the one deck that Prince Malchezaar could be good in. So let me break this to you guys. You're hearing this here first. Reno Lock. Okay, so I'll let that soak into your head. In Reno Lock, you actually sometimes end up drawing too many cards. And certainly sometimes you'll duplicate like the legends that are in your deck, or maybe Prince Malchezaar gets two, but it's fine if you happen to have two duplicate. Your Reno just won't glow. Okay, so I've just been informed that Prince Malchezaar apparently does not add legendary minions that are already in your deck. So that's gonna make the card a little less good, and also a little better, because that means Reno will never get a duplicate, and you can get your Tyrion in Reno. Okay, so apparently I've just been informed that you also cannot get legendary minions from other classes. Okay, this card sucks, because you're already running the good legendaries. You know, hearing myself again, that would have been interesting if you could get legendary minions from other classes, and you could get duplicate legendaries in your deck. But since you can't put duplicates of the legends that you already put in, that means you're always getting like bad legendaries or things like that. So anyways, I rated it a 1-star card, and it did end up being a 1-star card, although noteworthy that it saw a little bit of play competitively, and I say competitively in the lightest sense of it, with the plan to fatigue out your opponent. But now I'm going to take on all of this zoo part of the set. I came to the conclusion that I think that if you're running a Zubot or a Zubot Menagerie Magician deck, you need a deck that can control the board early, which means you have to focus on early game Beast Dragons or Murlocs. You can't put the Zubot or the Menagerie Magician in a control deck. So Zubot, I think, is most likely to fit into an aggro paladin style or a Zoo. So on the topic of Zubot, I did try a Zoo deck. It was pretty bad. And I think I was accurate in saying that if it was to see play in a deck, that it would be an aggressive deck. So I rated it a 2-star, and it ended up not working out. And it's actually a 1-star card. And it's cards like these which make me, in future expansions or adventures, I'm going to build the actual deck and like see if I can put it in. And if I can't, then I'll actually just say it's bad instead of hedging and calling it potential. Menagerie Magician, kind of a finisher in those types of decks. I mean, I just can't resist the possibility of 3 mana 6/6 or 5 mana 10/10. Yeah, that was the dream. Nowadays, when we really look back on it, and we aren't starry-eyed looking at a new card, that was never going to really happen, was it? I did try. We tried putting in the Murloc Tiny Fin in the deck, just so you could play a 0-mana card, so you would always have something to buff with Menagerie Magician. Ended up not being very good. These two cards are still going to be in the set when Standard rotates, though, and such a deck still has the possibility of coming to fruition should like a cheap Beast and a cheap Dragon and a cheap Murloc all be decent. So I rated it a 2-star card, but actually 1-star. Didn't have any hopes, really. And I think the key realization I found by actually attempting to build these decks is that the Curator deck is not necessarily the same as the Zubot or the Menagerie Magician deck, although you probably toss in the Curator into those also. The Curator is a card that you can just put into a control deck, which you probably would not run Zubot or Menagerie Magician in. This card is just card advantage, just value. Whereas Zubot and Menagerie Magician require you to have the board control, which control decks generally do not have. So this card I thought had a bit more potential than the other ones. I rated it a 3-star card. It actually ends up being a 4-star card because it did see play in one specific competitive deck. It saw play in Dragon Warrior Karazhan days, and it was actually a strong card in Dragon Warrior. Avian Watcher. Play this card in a deck that expected to have a secret out. And from my earlier reviews, I thought that the Control Mage cards has potential, so I'll say that Avian Watcher has potential. This was a clear example of lazy reviewing, where I was just like, 5 mana 4/7 stats, that's vaguely good. I'm just gonna say potential and like maybe that deck comes about. Nowadays I would try to like build every single deck and see if I could fit it in. There was no fitting in this card into the deck. So I rated it a 2-star. It's a 1-star and it's like completely hopeless. But Lurker I actually think is one of the more interesting cards in this set. Feels like it just is too much mana to play around with cutesy ways. But yet, there's a lot of cutesy things you can do with it. Involving bounce, involving evolution, involving silence. Time will tell on whether or not this is a really good effect. I'm going to say for now that it's a bad card, though, in terms of power level. I'm going to say I rated that card a 2-star. It's easy to look back on 5 months of Karazhan and be like, look, I haven't seen that at all. Of course it's terrible. Who was ever going to play a 6-mana 3/3? But the effect was so interesting that when you look at it and don't actually get any play with it at all yet, it had the possibility of being a combo card. It still has the possibility of being some kind of crazy combo card if the right card is printed with it someday. Not at the moment, not then, etc. So I rated it a 2-star card. It's a 1-star card. I think Bookworm is an excellent card, which is going to see play in the Dragon control decks. Some pros have criticized this card because the stats are a little bit poor, it costs a bit too much mana. Now the thing is, Shadow Word Pain is actually a good card. The other thing is that this goes into a dragon deck and it itself is a dragon, so it enables your other dragon cards. I feel like those two facts combine to make Bookworm an excellent card. So again, the Control Paladin dragon deck never came to fruition. the Dragon Priest never came to fruition during Karazhan, and the Dragon Warrior deck, it saw some play in that deck. So I rated this a 4-star card, and it ended up being 3 stars for Karazhan. Not all Dragon Warriors ran it. Some Dragon Warriors ran it. It usually took the space of 1 Draconid Crusher. Usually wasn't a 2 of. Medivh the Guardian. This card is the king of Control v Control. Basically, it goes into quite a few decks, and it's kind of a metagame call as to whether or not there's enough control versus control matchups out there. So I rated that a 4-star. It did not end up being a control meta, and I have hopefully since learned after getting burned multiple times on thinking the meta will slow down. Spoiler, the meta never slows down. Even when an expansion is printed with absolutely no asterisk, except like 1 or 2 aggro cards, the meta doesn't slow down. So this ended up actually seeing pretty much no practical play whatsoever. It's a 1-star card, though it remained a viable tech choice if you ever expected it to be a control meta, maybe in tournaments. And finally, we have the new giant on the block, Arcane Giant. I see some serious possibilities with this card. You might see a new type of Miracle Rogue. They cast a bunch of spells and then they go Arcane Giant, Conceal. And then the next turn they hit you in the face for 16. I think Arcane Giant I'm going to put into the good category. And it has the potential to be like the sleeper hit of this set. Wow, this card is ridiculous. Why didn't we see a 0-mana 8 as good? Well, this card was actually the sleeper hit of the set. Believe it or not, 5 months ago when we saw the cards of Karazhan, this card didn't really get that much attention. Even though Yogg Druid was already there, already casting a bunch of spells either. So I rated it a 4-star card, but it was actually a 5-star card. Arcane Giant saw a lot of play in Yogg Druid. This card also saw some play in the Blood Patron deck, which is a warrior deck based around getting patrons out, but also getting Arcane Giants out, and then using Blood Warriors to copy 2 Arcane Giants. So you would play 2 0-mana 8/8s, you would Whirlwind them, and then Blood Warriors, and then get another 2 0-mana 8/8s in your hand, which you may or may not have then played, depending on the matchup. So overall in Karazhan, I'd say my ratings were, on the whole, a little bit high. The card that I missed on the most was Maelstrom Portal. But hopefully, moving forward, I won't get another Dr. Boom, Darkshire Councilman, and Maelstrom Portal incorrectly again. Has there already been a gadgetzan card that I've gotten ridiculously wrong? I'm sad I didn't rate Small Time Buccaneer higher, but at least I rated it 3 stars. I think Dirty Rat is actually going to settle down to be the 2-star rating that I gave it. It's like seeing less and less play as time goes on. Opinion me, and depending on the meta, it's also going to drop off a bit, I'd say.